Hi students, welcome to week 13, and this week, although the lecture is called The Fall of Imperial China, there's a lot of Imperial China left to come before we get to the fall. We're looking at China in the late medieval and in the early modern periods, and most significantly, this is going to be the point where China begins to increase its level of interaction with the non-Western world. And so we're going to begin with the Song Dynasty, and the Song Dynasty which brings a certain amount of order out of the chaos of the period of the 5 dynasties and the 10 kingdoms, that mess that we talked about that follows the Tang Dynasty last time. And so this period began with the rise of the Northern Song in the northeast that you can see on your map here, and then to the northeast the Liao Dynasty, which is a dynasty of the Khitan peoples, so not a Han Chinese dynasty, but a Khitan dynasty. And then to the northwest, the Western Jia, which are a Tangut dynasty. So we have some new ethnic groups into the mix here. We're going to start by talking about the Tanguts. So the Tanguts had fought against the Sui, but they had been betrayed and attacked by the Tang. They were betrayed and attacked by the Tang, and then they were betrayed and attacked by the Tibetans. So they're basically stabbed in the back both times, and the Tibetans drive them out of their homeland, and so they migrate eastward and settle in Shaanxi. Remember that Shaanxi was the one of the early sites of Chinese settlement. And you can see that this green area where the Tanguts are, where they're established, it's an area in that Yellow River Valley basin. They remained caught between the Tibetans and the Tang, who are both more powerful than them, each kind of alternating between being allied with one and opposing the other to try and play one off against each other. Then, after the fall of the Tang Dynasty, they're able to assert their independence a little more. And in 1038, their leader Jingzong declared himself the emperor and established a state that mirrored a lot of Chinese institutional state practices. Now, the Tangut, led by Jingzong, are going to fight against the Song Dynasty, which is a Han Chinese dynasty, but the war is going to be a stalemate. And the Song campaigns are going to continue under later rulers. The Song typically are going to be the more powerful dynasty, but they're not going to be able to conquer the Tangut. Another important ruler of the Western Jia, the Tangut dynasty, was named Renzong, who came to power in 1139, and this is after the rise of the Jin Dynasty in China. When we've moved on from the Song. So we'll come to the Jin a little later in the lecture. So this is now in the 12th century. And so Renzong is an active ruler. He's an insight into what it took to be a successful ruler in medieval China at this time. He provides relief, tax relief after famines, and he establishes new schools, and he establishes Confucian examinations, similar to the examinations that had been established under the Han and under the Tang in China. The idea that those who are going to hold the way this government is structured, as I've said before, the most powerful positions, the most prestigious positions are those who work for the government. And in order to get one of these positions, you had to pass examinations in the Confucian classics. The idea being that if you understand Confucian philosophy and the Confucian texts, it means you understand how the different hierarchies and moving parts of a society and a government and a community work together and intersected together. Renzong also built Buddhist temples, but he also promoted Buddhism and Buddhist learning. Okay, so just to skip back to the other slide for a second, that's the Tangut Western Jia dynasty in the west. Now, we move further south to look at the Northern Song. In 960, the Emperor Taozu had seized the imperial throne from the later Zhou. The later Zhou had been trying to establish some kind of unity in the mess of the 5 dynasties and the 10 kingdoms, but they failed, and this ruler, leader of the Northern Song, sets himself up as the Emperor Taizu. And he spends the next 16 years reuniting much of the greater Chinese empire of the Han and Tang dynasties. He establishes a new capital at Kaifeng, and this marks the beginning of the Northern Song period. Kaifeng will become one of the largest cities in the world at the time, with a population of over 1 million. Once again, the Northern Song are going to rule by employing a meritocratic bureaucracy. Governed by those who had passed examinations in the Confucian classics. The growth of the population, the importance of these examinations meant that a scholar gentry class increasingly comes to dominate local government, those who had been successful in passing these examinations. And the Northern Song also promoted scientific and academic achievements. We see more accurate atlases develop at this time, an atlas of all the cities and provinces in the empire. We see more accurate clocks. We see mathematical achievements, including the use of zero, and we see the development of movable type printing. A good 300, 400, 500 years earlier even than in Western Europe. Nevertheless, movable printing, the value of movable printing is going to be limited by the huge Chinese alphabet. We talked about this, you have thousands and thousands of Chinese characters. And so establishing a printing typeface to accommodate all these characters is really pretty tricky. And so that limits, even though movable printing has now been developed, its use is going to be limited. The Song maintained a wide range of different diplomatic relations with the Chola in India. So remember, this is a time of political fragmentation in India, but where in southern India, the Chola are the most powerful rulers. With the Fatimids, we haven't talked about the Fatimids in this class, but they are the rulers of Egypt at the time. With the Srivijaya in Southeast Asia, and with Korea and Japan. Now, to the north, you have the Liao dynasty of the Khitan peoples, and the Song were forced to pay tribute to the Liao to end their raids. So you have ongoing raids carried out by these Khitan groups, by the Liao, and the Song don't have the energy to defend themselves against them, and so they make a treaty with them and pay them tribute. Nevertheless, the Liao relied on the Song for trade. And so that meant that even though the Song are having to pay tribute to the Liao, they're not coming out that much behind, perhaps even a little ahead, because they're able to set trading prices in a way that's advantageous to them. The Song also built a huge defensive forest. So not a wall, but a forest, a very thickly planted forest, and this was built along the border between them and the Liao to blunt future attacks. As we move into the 11th century, the Chancellor Fan Zhongyan tried to pass what were known as the Quigley reforms. These were designed to improve recruitment. So they increased salaries of government officials in order to maintain this situation where being employed by the government is the best position that you can aspire to in this society. And they improved education for the poor. Remember, the Tang had established state-funded schools in order to expand the number of people who had access to the education necessary to take on the Confucian examinations. And the Quigley reforms are designed to do the same thing. Other later reforms are promoted by a ruler named Wang Anshi, and they include a tax on land, government monopolies of certain goods like salt and iron, the creation of local militia groups, and higher standards for imperial examinations. So at the same time as they're expanding access to education, so more people have a chance at sitting these examinations, they're making it more difficult to pass them. In order, you've got a growing population, you only have a limited number of government posts, you need to find out who the best candidates are, and these tests are considered the best form. And so you can see how these reforms are all designed to increase stability and unity in China under the rule of the Song. So we talked about the Tangut to the west, we talked about the Song sort of to the south, and now we're going to go north and we're going to talk about the Jin Dynasty. And the Jin Dynasty have their origins in the Jurchen tribe, who rebelled against their Liao rulers. So you have the Liao dynasty, which is a dynasty of Khitan peoples, and then you have the Jin dynasty, which is a dynasty of Jurchen peoples. Now, the Jurchen had been ruled by the Liao, but when the Liao, according to the sources that we have, start to demand that the Jurchen give up their daughters as prostitutes as a form of tribute, then the Jurchen rebel and they overthrow the Liao. They overthrow the Liao in 1125. After they've overthrown the Liao, they're able to invade China because the Song had removed their defensive forest in order to attack the Liao themselves. And so the Han Chinese accept the Jurchen as a new ruling dynasty, as the Jin dynasty. And the Jin conquer most of northern China. And so now you have northern China that's ruled by the Jin dynasty and southern China that's going to be ruled by the Song dynasty. We'll talk a little bit more about the Song ruling southern China in a little bit. But the Han Chinese, the indigenous Chinese peoples in northern China, accepted the rule of the Jin. And the Jin themselves became increasingly Sinicized. They adopted Chinese culture, they intermarried with the Han Chinese, but their nobles continued to hold the leading positions in court and in government, so they remain in control. In 1153, the new emperor, Wanyang Liang, moved his capital to Beijing, which had been the former Liao capital. He also established Kaifeng as the southern capital. So there are going to be two capitals that the Jin are going to use to rule this region. And he executed 150 leading Jurchen nobles in order to secure his position. So the Jin have now established themselves in northern China. They've adopted a lot of aspects of Chinese culture. The Han Chinese have accepted their rule in the north. In the south, the Song regrouped under their leader Gaozong and withdrew south of the Yangtze River and established a new dynasty, a new sort of extension of the Song dynasty. And this southern Song dynasty is much more focused on trade and seafaring. And so they're going to sponsor massive shipbuilding and harbor improvement projects in these three cities, Guangzhou, and Xiamen. And they're going to establish a navy that enables them to protect their merchant ships and to defend the efforts of the Jin to invade their land in the mid-12th century. So you have these huge we talk about paddle steamers on the Mississippi. That's the way these ships are designed, these naval ships are designed. They're paddle wheel vessels and they're armed with catapults that are hurling bombs comprised of gunpowder. So this is some pretty sophisticated naval warfare, especially in comparison with what's going on in the West at the time. And so the foreign trade that the Song established with the rest of the Indian Ocean helped them influence other economies. And so you start to find Central Asian merchants traveling to live in China and becoming an important part of this society. At the same time, Song investors are making money, so there's a growth of a banking and investment economy through a pretty sophisticated system of diversification of assets. So you have these Song investors and bankers who are they're investing a little bit in a lot of ships, and if one of the ships sinks, they cover their losses with other merchant vessels. And so these are the great industries or the basis of the economy of the Southern Song. The economy of the Southern Song is what's considered a command economy. It's an economy where the government exercises significant power in planning the economy. There is a public healthcare system with public retirement homes, clinics, graveyards. The iron industry is partly controlled by the government. We start to see an increase in the amount of iron produced by China, as great as 200 million pounds of iron a year. an increase in copper coins and paper money that also